Good morning. Welcome to the Morning Report. My name is Willie Lawson. Trust that you are well today. There are moments in a nation's history when a single change quietly reshapes everything that follows. Not overnight, not always visible, but structurally, deeply, and permanently. For the U.S., one of those moments came in 1913 with the ratification of the 16th Amendment. At the time, it was presented as a practical solution, a modernization, if you will, a way to fund a growing nation. But not everyone was convinced. There were those who warned clearly and forcefully that granting the federal government direct access to personal income would not remain limited, temporary, or restrained. They understood something fundamental, that power, once expanded, rarely contracts on its own. And more importantly, systems matter more than promises. Okay, to understand where we are, you have to understand where we started. Founders of this country did not design a system where the federal government had direct and continuous access to your personal income. In fact, they went out of their way to avoid it. Leaders like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison believed that federal power had to be structurally limited, not just politically restrained. The early federal government was funded primarily through tariffs or on imported goods and excise taxes on specific items. That wasn't an accident, it was intentional. And the logic was very simple. If the government is limited in how it can raise money, then it will be limited in how big it can become. Revenue wasn't just about funding, it was about restraint. In that system, the federal government was small and its reach was limited, and its financial appetite was constrained by design. And perhaps most importantly, you earned your money, you saw your money, and only then, if required, you paid a portion of it. Now, before 1913, there was a constitutional barrier that made a national income tax extremely difficult to implement. Direct taxes had to be apportioned amongst the states based on population. That meant you couldn't simply just tax individuals uniformly across the country. And in any attempt at a national income tax became complex and basically impractical. There was even an attempt in 1894 to impose an income tax, but it was struck down by the Supreme Court. Even Grover Cleveland recognized the danger of expanding federal taxation into areas traditionally reserved for the states, warning that such moves risked fundamentally altering the balance of power. The system held, well, until it didn't. Opposition to the income tax and to the 16th Amendment itself was real, and it came from serious people who understood power. Nelson Aldrich opposed the direct income taxation and favored tariffs as a primary funding mechanism, representing a long-standing belief that the federal government should not reach directly into individual earnings. Elihu Root raised constitutional concerns about removing the apportionment requirement, requiring that this was not just a tax change, but a structural shift in federal authority. Joseph Bailey warned about expanding centralized power and questioned whether such authority, once granted, could ever meaningfully be limited. Now, these were not fringe voices. These were experienced lawmakers, constitutional thinkers, and observers of political power. Their warnings were consistent. A tax introduced narrowly would expand broadly. A system justified as necessary would become permanent. And a burden aimed at the wealthy would spread to the general population. They understood something simple and profound. Once the government gains direct access to income without structural limits, it will not voluntarily limit itself. So, with the ratification of the 16th Amendment, everything changed. Congress was granted power to tax incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment. That removed the final structural restraint. At first, the system appeared to conform or confirm the promises of its supporters. It had limited reach, modest rates, and targeted application. But systems do not operate on promises. They operate on incentives. And the incentive was now clear. The more income generated in the economy, the more revenue available to the federal government. Growth was no longer constrained, it was enabled. The full transformation came during World War II, of course. The United States needed money, fast and in massive quantities. Military spending surged, and the scale of the conflict demanded a new level of financial mobilization. In 1943, the government implemented widespread paycheck withholdings. Before withholding, you received your full income and then paid later. After withholding, the government took its share before you even saw it. This was not just administrative efficiency, it was a psychological shift. Because before 1943, taxes were something you owed. After 1943, taxes became something that was continuously taken. Every paycheck became a tax event. Every raise increased not just your income, but the government share. Every success carried an automatic obligation. The federal government was no longer a distant entity funded directly through commerce. It became a direct partner in your labor. And at that point, the language became unavoidable. The government is not a silent partner in your wealth, it's an active one. It collects before you do. With your successes, it adjusts rules over time. This is not passive taxation. This is embedded participation. Okay. The income tax did more than fund federal government. It enabled it to expand. Before the 16th Amendment, revenue was limited and growth was constrained. After revenue scaled with the economy and growth became sustainable, massive federal programs, global commitments, and long-term obligations all depend on one thing: reliable, continuous funding. And that is exactly what the income tax provides. So the question becomes unavoidable. Did government grow because it needed to? Or because it finally had the ability to? If the mechanism made expansion possible, then the mechanism must be examined. The founders built a system where limited revenue constrained government. Today, we have a system where government demands justify expanded revenue. That is a complete inversion. So instead of asking what we can afford to fund, we ask how can we generate enough to fund everything we have decided to. The restraint is gone. And once it's gone, growth becomes the default. The system persists in part because it's designed to avoid resistance. Withholding removes friction. Instead of large, visible payments, you experience small, consistent deductions. There's no moment of decision, no moment of confrontation, just a steady reduction over time. It feels normal. People react to visible immediate costs they adapt to embedded ones. The modern tax code adds another layer. It is massive and complex, filled with deductions, credits, exemptions, and phase outs. This complexity creates confusion, dependence, and a fear of change. People do not defend the system because they love it. They tolerate it because replacing it feels uncertain. So if the income tax is the engine of federal expansion, then repealing it is not extreme. It's logical. As long as the government has direct access to our income, its growth is not meaningfully constrained and its incentives favor expansion. Remove that access and you restore limits. Whether repeal is mentioned, the immediate question is what replaces it? Now, there are two major alternatives that exist. You've heard of them, the flat tax and the fair tax. The flat tax simplifies the system with one rate, minimal deductions, and a greater transparency. It offers predictability and reduces manipulation, but it does not change the underlying structure. The government still taxes directly and still takes from your labor first. It improves the system, but does not transform it. The fair tax, however, takes a fundamentally different approach. It replaces income tax with a national consumption tax. There is no federal income tax, no payroll tax, no IRS as we know it. You earn your full paycheck and you are taxed when you spend. The shift controls from automatic extraction to visible voluntary taxation through consumption. And it restores timing and awareness. The fair tax also includes a prebate, a monthly payment designed to offset taxes on basic necessities. This ensures that spending up to the poverty level is effectively untaxed. It replaces a maze of deductions with a single visible mechanism. It is simply transparent and direct. Visibility changes behavior. So when people can see what they pay, they begin to ask questions. Transparency creates accountability. Accountability creates pressure, and pressure creates limits. That's why these alternatives are so often ignored. They challenge the current system at its core by removing hidden extraction and restoring clarity. Now, I have, since I learned about it and what little I know about it, I support the fair tax because it's structurally honest. It restores control to the individual, eliminates the hidden taxation, and forces accountability back into the system. The flat tax simplifies, but the fair tax transforms. Okay. Now, this isn't just about choosing between systems. It's about ownership. Who has first claim on your labor? Right now, the answer is clear. The system gets paid first, and you receive what remains. Repealing the 16th Amendment would force a national reckoning. What should government be doing? What can it afford? What things must be prioritized? Constraint would return, and hopefully with it, discipline. Because the founders believed that the government must be limited, power must be restrained, and citizens must control their labor. The current system reverses that. Repeal would restore it. Returning to tariffs and indirect taxation would limit federal growth, shift the burden away from income, and reconnect taxation to economic activity. Now, it's not going to be easy, but at least it'll be honest. At some point, a nation must decide who owns what we earn, the individual or the system. And that is a line that must be drawn. We're saying here, repeal the 16th and live free on the 15th is not just a slogan that I made up, is a declaration that should earn your full income. You should earn your full income. You should see it and control it. It seems insane that that is seen as an extremist viewpoint. I think you should go to work, and I think when you get paid, you should have all of the money that you earned. Wow. Or concept, as they say. That's what I think. Here's the deal. The 16th Amendment didn't just change taxation, it changed America. It expanded federal power, altered the relationship between the citizen and the state, and enabled a level of government growth that would have been impossible under the original design. Now, the question is simple, like it always is. Do we accept it or do we challenge it? Repeal the 16th and live free on the 15th. My name is Willie Lawson. This is the Morning Report. Morning Report is a production of fightbackmedia.com. Until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.